really fantastic news this weekend that government have awarded us finally 28.5 million quid for the A614. Those in the north of the county will know it is the spine of the county from the city all the way up through Bassetlaw into the A1, and there are all sorts of challenges around capacity there, junctions, roundabouts and things that need to be improved for safety, for traffic flows to benefit our economy. That's a huge amount of money, a massive vote of confidence in our delivery and our economic growth, and I'm really pleased to welcome it this weekend.
And this has been broadcast live and will be recorded for future viewing. With me today is today's Councillor Sybil Fielding, my Vice Chairman, Councillor Andre Camilleri, Robert Corden, Jim Creamer, Paul Henshaw, Andy Meakin, John Ogle, Philip Owen, Tom Smith, Roger Upton, Daniel Williamson and Councillor Chris Barnfather. So, item 1, do we have apologies for absence, please?
Sorry, Chair, sorry to interrupt. I think we also have Councillor Shaw as well, who's a substitute.
Sorry, I wasn't aware of that, Councillor Shaw, so apologies for that. We will know formally in a few moments, though. So, which takes us on to apologies for absence, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. I was about to say that Councillor Shaw is replacing Councillor Williamson and Councillor Barnfather is replacing Councillor Moxon for today only. Thank you.
And welcome back, Councillor Barnfather. I have to watch our P's and Q's. And welcome, Councillor Shaw, as well. So, do we have any declarations of interest, please? On any disclosable pecuniary interests or any private interests to declare, officers or members? I don't think so. No, thank you. And I also should have asked as well, could I ask officers who are addressing the meeting today just to introduce yourselves, please?
Sally Gill, Group Manager Planning. Thank you, Chairman.
Hi, I'm Mike Mencken,
David?
David Marsh, Major Projects Senior Practitioner, and I'm here to present the applications on Peak and Whitnall Drive and Bingham.
Thank you. And Jonathan? Super, welcome. And we also welcome Councillor Barney as well, who's a local member for the Eastleigh application. Right, now, yes, we've got, I also need to declare or check any declarations of lobbying. Has anyone had any lobbying for today's items? No? Okay, so thank you. So before we move on, if you're happy with this, I'd like to change the running order of today's meeting for various reasons, mainly to do with the number of speakers we've got on the different applications. So with your permission, we'll do the Eastleigh School, then the Bingham School, and then the Harworth application in that order, if we're okay with that. So with that, we will go on to the first application, which is indeed the outline application for a primary school, Remston Road, Eastleigh. And David, if you could talk us through this one, please.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll just wait for the technology to. Is that what we're waiting for?
Yes.
Yeah, the presentation. Where's it been? Who's loading it up?
It's Jonathan.
Oh, it's Jonathan. Oh, no pressure there. Oh, we're getting there. It's okay. Ah, yes.
Right, thank you.
I thought we might have to talk amongst ourselves for a few moments, but okay. So, David, over to you.
Right, thank you. This outline application relates to a proposed school site of approximately 1.8 hectares to the south of Eastleek and north of Remston Road in Eastleek. The site is made up of two parcels, land to the east of a built and occupied Persimmon Homes development adjoining Sheepwash Brook, and land at the northern end of a David Wilson Homes construction site. Public footpath Eastleek FP5 runs along the western boundary of the proposed school site and is included in the red line of the planning application. The application red line also includes the highway loop road to be provided in the David Wilson development, which is 6.75 metres in width, and a linear strip of land through the Persimmon Homes area of open space between the public footpath and Sheepwash Way. Sheepwash Brook, which has small areas of Flood Zone 2 and Flood Zone 3 within the application site, forms the northern boundary. There is a drainage easement across the site, and surface water from the David Wilson Homes development discharges into the ditch running along the proposed school site eastern boundary. A mature plantation with trees bisects the site. Land to the north of the trees has a gentle slope towards the watercourse, but is generally flat. Land to the south of the trees rises 5.5 metres from the northeast corner to the southwest. David Wilson Homes is currently grading the site prior to its transfer to the County Council. There is limited on-street parking available on Sheepwash Way, with extended lengths of dropped curb along the road frontage. It is estimated that there is on-street parking for approximately 12 cars on Sheepwash Way and Skipper Close, in reasonable proximity to the school site. Although there is off-street parking available on the wider highway network within the Persimmon's home development, sorry, just clarify that. There's approximately 12 parking spaces on Sheepwash Way and Skipper Close, reasonably close to the school site, but there is other off-street parking available on the wider highway network within the Persimmon Homes development. The combined housing developments provide a total of 642 dwellings, which generates a demand for 135 primary pupil places, the majority of which would be an easy walking distance of the school site. The relevant grants of planning permission are set out in paragraphs 7 to 14 of the report. The key matters to note are that the location of a school site has been identified in the grants of planning permission. Both principal permissions were granted on appeal. In the case of the Persimmon Homes development, which preceded the David Wilson Homes development, provision was made for a school that would have been accessed and serviced only from Sheepwash Way. The application presented for determination is an outline, with all matters reserved, except for the points of vehicular and pedestrian access and the scale of proposed development, both in terms of the physical size of the building and the number of pupils to be accommodated. Outline planning permission is sought for the erection of a primary school for up to 2 forms of entry, which is 420 pupils, in 2 phases, plus a 26-place nursery. The vehicular access point would be towards the eastern end of the highway frontage to the loop road within the David Wilson Homes development site. The pedestrian gate would be on the western boundary of the school, accessed from public footpath Eastleek FP5. The latest approved housing layout on the David Wilson Homes development includes a gravel surfaced path linking that housing site with Sheepwash Way. The footpath would need to be upgraded to a lit 3-metre wide bound surface and to be suitable for use by both pedestrians and cyclists. The school would initially be built as a single form of entry school with a 210 capacity. And the applicant has indicated that the hall, kitchen and car park would be suitably sized in phase 1 to accommodate the later expansion to 420 pupils. The floor area of the building in phase 1 would be approximately 1,285 square metres and increased by approximately 950 square metres in phase 2. The school building would be of two-storey construction with a proposed maximum height not exceeding 12 metres. Housing development has been approved to the west of the school site, subject to the house builder entering a Section 106 agreement, with the closest house 9.3 metres from the public footpath. Although not submitted for approval as part of this application, the applicant has indicated that the anticipated building span at its western end would not exceed 24 metres and would not exceed 8.5 metres within 12 metres of the western side of the public footpath, Eastleek FP5. So that would be approximately 21 metres from the nearest property. There are currently no details of parking demand for the proposed school, and the transport statement uses national data on modes of travel and trips to school. Parents typically park on surrounding streets during morning and afternoon drop-off pick-up periods. The pedestrian link providing connectivity between the David Wilson Homes development and Eastleek will also be used by parents taking children to school. Parents who choose to drive to school may find it more convenient to access the school from Sheepwash Way, being closer to the village centre, as an alternative to a longer car journey, but closer to the school gate along Ramsden Road and through the David Wilson Homes development. Although school start-finish times are not proposed in the application, the transport statement identifies that the busiest periods are between 8:45 and 9 o'clock in the morning and 2 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. and that after drop-off or collection, vehicles quickly disperse. It is anticipated that the school would grow incrementally, with the school initially having 120 pupils, made up of 30 in the reception year and 15 pupils across all other age groups. And that is likely to generate 44 morning and 36 afternoon trips by car. The transport statement promotes the use of a travel plan to mitigate the impacts of traffic on the highway network. The construction access to the school has not been specified in the application, although the two Section 106 agreements relevant to this application make provision for construction access to be gained through the David Wilson Homes development or from the Persimmon Homes development along Sheepwash Way. Although an illustrative layout has been submitted, other than the positions of the vehicular and pedestrian access, all of the details shown are reserved for future approval and do not form part of this application. The two adjoining residential estate developments each have a requirement to provide land for the erection of a school. A grant of outline planning permission will trigger the transfer of land to the County Council as set out in the Section 106 agreements of the residential outline permissions. In determining this application, consideration needs to be given to whether the scale of proposed development can be accommodated on the site. Schools are designed to comply with guidance in Building Bulletin 103, which sets out government area guidelines for mainstream schools. It is considered that the key elements for a school, the building, service areas in proximity to the kitchens and school hall, the car park, outdoor hard play areas, informal grassed areas and formal sports pitches can be satisfactorily accommodated, and the detail will be provided in a later submission. The proposed two-storey school can easily be accommodated within the proposed maximum height of 12 metres and of an appropriate scale in the context of the location, other than towards the western boundary, where the potential overbearing impact of a taller structure needs more detailed consideration. At this point, The building should be of a more domestic scale in terms of its height. Appropriate restrictions on the height of the building are set out in recommended condition 6J. House builder layouts can change, and potential unacceptable threat to privacy can be considered in the detailed design. The traffic and highway impact of the scale of proposed development also needs to be considered. Figure 3 at paragraph 86 of the papers, as shown on this slide, sets out the theoretical number of car trips and percentage possible split that could use either Remston Road or Sheepwash Way for the journey to school. This is likely to be influenced by several factors, including the convenience and availability of on-street parking and the distance that has to be walked to school after parking. The location of the school has been taken into account in the 6.75 metre design width of the David Wilson Homes residential estate road. The estate loop road will allow vehicles to arrive and leave in a forward gear without having to carry out a 3-point turn. It is considered that parent highway parking would not be detrimental to highway safety, and the amenity impacts of cars waiting while dropping off or collecting children are short-lived. The provision of a dedicated vehicular drop-off pickup zone outside the school, including provision for buses and coaches, raised by Rushcliffe Borough Council, has been discussed with NCC Highways Development Control, who advise that the designed road width is appropriate outside a school so as to allow the passage of vehicles. School buses are likely to visit the school infrequently and outside of peak travel times. Similarly, it is suggested in the representation by Eastleigh Parish Council that a lay-by should be provided for school parking, but it is not considered to be required to address a highway safety issue. Furthermore, the provision of facilities that make travel by car more attractive than non-car-based journeys is not considered to be sustainable. A school zone would be required, which would comprise school keep clear markings, pedestrian guardrail where the school access path emerges onto the highway, and advanced signage. A traffic regulation order would be the subject of a separate process and public consultation. With reference to the representation reported at paragraph 37G, school keep clear markings are provided in accordance with regulations. The road in front of David Wilson Homes plots 266 to 273 is to be constructed as a private drive and would not be subject of a traffic regulation order. Occupiers would be able to exercise private property rights to control errant parking. The minimum number of car parking spaces required for a 210 place and 420 place school are set out in recommended conditions, with 22 spaces increasing to 32 parking spaces in the second phase of development. Suitable provision is recommended for electric vehicle charging and cycling. The location of the school pedestrian access gate directly adjoining the public footpath would segregate the school pedestrian and vehicular access points, and the provision of a parent assembly area outside the pedestrian entrance gate so as not to impede use of the path can be incorporated in the design. In encouraging a modal shift from the use of the car to more sustainable means of travel to school, it is important that provision is made for both pedestrians and cyclists. Cycling is not permitted on a public footpath, and an order under the Cycle Tracks Act 1984 will need to be made to alter the status of the public footpath. Provision of a cycle route immediately adjacent to the school will provide good connectivity, delivering the development envisaged in the grant of the David Wilson Homes permission, and offer a good quality opportunity to travel to school other than by car. While drop-off and pick-up at the school gate is likely to be popular with parents as part of a daily work commute, Sheepwash Way and other roads on the Persimmon Homes development are likely to be popular for drop-off and pick-up for journeys originating within and returning to Eastleigh. The greater distance to be walked from Sheepwash Way to the school gate is likely to lead to vehicles being parked for slightly longer periods, and it is considered less likely that cars will be left parked in locations that may obstruct access, such as parking across driveways. Whilst parking may be satisfactorily accommodated initially, the demand for on-street parking will increase as the school grows. The convenience or otherwise of on-street parking will influence parent behaviour when choosing where to park, and uncertainty over the availability of parking may cause a modal shift, with more children walking to school, or if driven to school, lead to an increase in short-term parking closer to the school gate accessed from Remston Road. As advised in the Highways Development Control consultation response of paragraphs 54 to 55, the turning area at the end of Sheepwash Way will need to be protected through double yellow lines, and additional measures may be required to regulate parking on the highway. A traffic regulation order will be subject to separate procedure, including public consultation. Objections received will be considered when making a traffic regulation order with regard to impact on safety and amenity. Having regard to the wider site planning history, which has identified the location of a school site, it is considered that there is a reasonable prospect of a traffic regulation order to regulate errant parking being successful. Expansion of the school in phase 2 would not worsen parking around the Sheepwash Way turning head, but is likely to push parking issues further afield. Condition 32 recommends that an expansion of the school should not take place before traffic and amenity impacts have been assessed and could be better evaluated with the phase 1 school in operation. Delivery of the school to an anticipated opening date of September 22 will rely on several factors: the road within the David Wilson Home site and pedestrian cycle links will need to have been constructed to a suitable standard to allow safe access to the school. The applicant will need to ensure that service traffic, staff, visitors and parents travelling by car will have unencumbered access to the school in order to satisfy condition 22, and is a matter that the applicant will need to address in the land transfer. In addition, the path along public footpath Eastleigh FP5 and link to Sheepwash Way will need to have been constructed to a suitable standard and be safe for use by both pedestrians and cyclists. This presentation has focused on the key issues related to access and traffic and the scale of development and other matters relevant to the determination of the application, and recommended conditions are set out in the report. A late representation has been submitted by Councillor Thomas from Rushcliffe Borough Council as ward member and on behalf of the Parish Council through Councillor Barney, which restates elements of the reported representation received from Rushcliffe Borough Council related to the provision of a dedicated pick-up drop-off zone outside the school, provision of additional parking in a reserved matters application, provision of a parent assembly area outside the school gate, provision of school zigzag markings on the private drive to plots 266 to 273, and emergency access to the school playing field. On this final point, the school would require access to the field for maintenance, which could equally serve as an emergency field access, but this will be a matter to be considered in the detailed design. It is recommended the planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Could I ask if any members have any questions for clarification for Mr. Marsh at this stage? Councillor Upton. Just the reference to the loop road, the David Wilson development loop road off Rempston Road. I presume it's two-way, not one-way. In other words, you come off Rempston Road, you can go either left or right round the loop.
When that development is complete, yes, you would be able to go around the David Wilson development in a loop. Either way, yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we have public speakers on this item. So if I could ask Mr. Barker, if you could just read out and confirm the guidance and rules, please. Thank you.
So each speaker will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes, with the exception of Councillor Barney, who, as a local member, is entitled to a maximum of 10 minutes. Notice will be given to you when the final minute of your allotted time has arrived by me saying 1 minute. Speakers should not introduce new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents, and only issues relevant to the planning application should be addressed in the presentation. These include impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as property rights, covenants, loss of property value or view. Members of the committee may ask you questions for the purposes of clarification. The chairman will invite the relevant officer to respond to any factual matters raised by your presentation or subsequent questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the first speaker is from ARC Partnership. Now, Andrew, or is it Andrew or is it Assad? I've got two. Is Assad. So if you'd like to address the committee, please.
Morning.
Sorry to interrupt. Is your mic working? Sorry, is it? Oh, right.
Sorry, can people hear me? Apologies. We've worked with council officers and stakeholders to ensure that the application captures and reflects the need to provide school places and the concepts and principles of those items identified as part of the outline planning application. The development site provides an ideal opportunity to design a school which integrates with and is sympathetic to the surrounding environment and can help demonstrate the importance of the site's biodiversity, support wildlife, transition from mature copse to trim trails and play areas, and once designed, help deliver a comprehensive, well-rounded project. Notwithstanding the requirements already outlined in the report, including those of scale and fenestration and travel, the site provides an opportunity also to create a sense of place and ownership as part of the wider development and community. Sustainable travel, pedestrian and cycle connectivity are of course key elements, and through school travel plans can help educate and encourage a modal shift in the future and reduce traffic in the long term, along with the associated health and well-being benefits. We look forward to seeking your support and help to make the project a success, delivering much needed school places, as well as meeting the wider environmental and sustainable objectives as we design in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very clear. And our next speaker on this item is the local member, Councillor Barney, please. Oh, give it a good punch. Oh, right.
That microphone's obviously got sick of hearing my voice, seeing as I was only here just last week, for which I apologise, committee. I promise I won't make a habit of addressing this committee. But, Chairman, I'm here this morning because, as ward member, I wholeheartedly endorse and support this planning application. The village of Eastleigh has undergone radical change in recent years due to the number of new dwellings built. Indeed, housing numbers have increased to the extent that the population of Eastleigh is now akin to that of a small town. With each wave of new development, the local community have protested what they have perceived as yet more unfair housing allocations. The parish council, elected representatives and residents have fought hard for enhanced facilities and infrastructure to keep up with the growing demands. But all too often, while Eastleigh has embraced and welcomed its new residents with neighbourly grace, the community infrastructure has been stretched far beyond what is reasonable. Now, I realise that there have been a small number of objections made against this planning application from local residents, and I want to be respectful of these. However, for the most part, they are from residents who themselves have benefited from the new housing. They now live adjacent to the proposed new school site. While I appreciate their concerns, the proposed location of this new school has been tabled since 2015. 6 years on, here we are. The housing has for the most part been built, but the now desperately needed new primary school has not. Dwellings that were granted planning permission in the same application that referenced this proposed school site are now built and occupied, but the school is not. My predecessor at the County Council, Andrew Brown, supported this school. The Parish Council, the Borough Council, and the Borough Councillors have all supported it. Indeed, they have made very constructive comments that have influenced the officer's report before us today, and they were referenced. These measures include recommendations to mitigate the concerns of residents on the Persimmon estate, particularly those who reside closest to the school on Sheepwash Way. I fully support these recommendations, which include the proposal of double yellow lines to prevent problem parking at the Hammerhead turning point of Sheepwash Way. And so, committee, I plead with you, please grant this permission. Enable Notts County Council to take title of this land, and let's give our county council what it needs to get this fabulous and much needed primary school built. Not in the next 6 years, but in the next few months. I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barney, and you're very welcome at this committee. Don't feel bad about it, as all members are. So we've heard from our public speakers. Do any members have any questions or points of clarification? Oh my word! Right, Councillor Barnfather, then Councillor Creamer, and then Councillor Owen. Oh, okay. Councillor Barnfather.
Thank you, Chair. I obviously support the application that's before us, in respect to the fact that a new school is always welcome, and this is a new school that is needed for the development that's in place. But I will raise an issue that I've previously raised in this chamber as a member of this committee, and that's in relation to the parking non-sustainable lack of drop-off space. I listened to the ARC representative talk about welcoming comments from this committee today in terms of looking at their sustainable objectives as we design for the future. Well, I previously raised it in this chamber at this committee about the lack of drop-off spaces in front of schools. Now, that's fine. When we have existing schools already in situ in the middle of a building, an estate, you cannot then build in those drop-off spaces because there quite simply is not enough available land. But we've got a greenfield site here, and yet again we are designing on a greenfield site where we're not putting a drop-off space in front of the school. That to me is an abject failure in terms of this application. It won't stop me from voting for it because the merits of the application outweigh the disadvantages, but it would be wrong of me not to mention it. There's a reference in the report here, and it says basically, if there's a problem with parking, well, it's down to the householder to deal with that problem. Now, that to me is, I'll be perfectly honest, that's us obviating our responsibilities as a planning authority. We shouldn't be planning to fail, we should be planning to succeed. Why we are not building into new schools on greenfield sites a proper designed and constructed bus drop-off point or parent drop-off point is utterly beyond me.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Could I just remind members, this is just points of clarification at this stage. We'll get into the debate in the next few moments.
I could have raised it as a clarification when the first speaker, Chair, but I did hold my breath till then.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Councillor Creamer, any points of clarification first?
Yeah, it's clarification. It's very quick because it is actually on the same line, because they were actually about the design. And I was going to ask on the design, how are they going to discourage actually parking in what little drop-off space there is? But that was the same sort of question as Councillor Barnfather, basically. But in the design, and apologies, I thought I turned it off.
That's okay. We won't fine you. Right, and Councillor Owen, did you indicate too? When we come to the discussion, right? Okay. So, any other clarifications? No. So, Mr. Marsh, can you just clarify those couple of points but before we get into the actual debate in a few minutes, just to pick up on the Councillor Barnfather and Creamer, the parking in particular.
On the point which Councillor Barnfather's raised, the County Council are given a site on which to build a school. That needs to take account of developments which are approved by another authority, in this case Rushcliffe Borough Council. Rushcliffe Borough Council will have considered the location of the proposed housing development, and the particular housing development in question which will be impacted, which is a private drive, has been approved adjacent to where the known access point to the school site is going to be. It is a problem. I suppose it's the hand we are dealt with. That permission has been granted, although it is still subject to a Section 106 agreement. Similarly, at the end of Sheepwash Way, there is a private drive off the end of Sheepwash Way. But the traffic regulation orders can be introduced only to deal with the regulation of traffic on the public highway. Now, in terms of the school being accessed by vehicular traffic from the David Wilson Homes Loop Road, Highways Development Control have assured me that the location of that school has been known because it was in the outline planning permission, and that the road on that loop road will be 6.75 metres in width, which is wider than a normal road. And that is in recognition of the fact that there will be that there will be pick up and drop off and traffic associated with the school. The other thing in terms of the design to factor in is that the school pick up and drop off takes place at the beginning and end of the school day. And if a dedicated area was provided simply for that purpose, it would not be a particularly efficient use of land for the County Council. Because it would need to take on ownership and control of that land. There is limited space land available. There is a very small allocation for the school development. The highway has been designed with at an appropriate width so as not to cause a particular congestion problem, and the road is sufficient width to allow parking to take place on the highway. Parking on the public highway is something which is permissible as long as it takes place without causing a highway safety issue. And the Highway Authority advise that they are comfortable with this particular proposal with parking on the highway.
Thank you. Sorry, yes.
I was going to say, does that address Councillor Creamer's point as well?
Not that much, because it's the specific question was what are they designing or trying to design to actually discourage. So it's not just actually later put down double yellows or not. It's, are they actually doing anything within the design to actually discourage parking at the drop-off point, even if it's only signage? But that question.
Right.
Perhaps we'll pick up on that and other matters when we get into the actual debate. That might be best. So with that, then I think that's picked up the points for now, but we can come back to those in a few moments. I'll formally move the recommendations on page 110 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Fielding.
Second, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. So now we'll go into the actual discussion and debate. So I'll open the floor up. Councillor Owen, please.
Chairman, thank you. It occurred to me later on after you'd asked for declarations of interest, or more to the point, declarations of lobbying, that perhaps I have been lobbied when I was in another role. I was lobbied by the former councillor Andy Brown and also by Councillor Reg Adair, who very kindly passed on my contact details to members of the local Eastleigh community. And I was lobbied by them as well that we needed to provide a school. So I don't know whether that counts as lobbying as far as this planning application is concerned, but nevertheless, I don't think it will, but nevertheless, for the sake of transparency, I will declare it now.
I think, having just had a well, would you like to help on that, Mrs. Clack? Please? Just to confirm, be on the
thank you,
safe
Chair, and thank you, Councillor Owen, for the transparency. However, I think if that lobbying, when you're in a former role at the County Council, was not actually in relation to this specific planning application, which is before the committee today, then I think it wouldn't count as lobbying on this particular application. But thank you again for your transparency.
And I hope it doesn't mean that I'm also predetermined on this application as well, because of course I spent a lot of my time in that former role trying to bring this this school to fruition.
Again, Councillor Owen, I think it'll be, if you were predetermining the particular facts of this particular application, with the details of which were in Mr. Marsh's report, and I think that could not have been the case. The papers were published for this application a week or so ago, and since then they've been in the public domain. You have considered them, and I'm sure we'll be approaching your decision making as always with an open mind. So I would not say there's any predetermination. Thank you.
I'm so relieved to hear that, Chairman. It would be most embarrassing if I had to refer myself, or if I were referred to my own committee as Chairman of Governance and Ethics.
So if we go on now to the actual item we're discussing.
Thank you. I welcome the actual application and the provision. The school, as Councillor Barney has said, has been very much needed for some time. There were, I believe, issues over the actual provision of the site that has caused some delays, but nevertheless we are more or less there now, and we have a very tight time schedule. The school has already got a user, a provider in place, which all they need now is this building. But in saying that, I'm delighted to see the application here and it moving forward. I do think, like Councillor Barnfather, that we have lost a huge opportunity to try and ameliorate some of the issues that inevitably will arise as far as a school is concerned in terms of highway issues. The first and obvious thing, and I won't dwell on it, is the provision of a drop-off point for parents and for anyone else at that time, particularly buses. There was a comment made, well, buses will visit infrequently. That's not necessarily true, because children now more and more are taken out of the classroom setting and do go out, if only to swimming. And there will be other activities as well. And if those buses are having to park on the street, it will cause problems. So I don't think that is a valid argument. And what also really concerns me is the fact that we are actually building in for on-street parking to take place by members of the workforce, by staff. I think the figure that was quoted, and I noted it down, was 12. We're building in an expectation that 12 members of staff will park on what will be a very busy parking situation when parents come to pick up and drop off their children. Now, I don't think that that is acceptable, quite honestly. I note in the report that we are saying that there should be a provision for no less than 70% of the total estimated number of staff. And it goes on to say, whilst ideally 100% provision would be considered appropriate. Well, if it's considered appropriate, why don't we do it? I'm sorry, Chairman, but I don't find that really very acceptable. And we go on to say in the report that we will encourage staff to engage in a cycle to work scheme. Well, come on now. Staff take to and from school, I know not so much at primary school level, but they do take materials to and from school to work on at home. Are we seriously expecting them to balance the pile of books on their handlebars in order to cycle home and then cycle back to school again? Now, we need to get real. I'm getting a little tired of hearing this term modal shift. Modal shift. It's the in phrase amongst highways people now to make an excuse for not doing anything about the problems. We're going to have a modal shift in that people are going to come, they're going to abandon their cars and they're all going to walk or cycle or scooter or jog or whatever. Absolute nonsense. We are told in paragraph 31 that parents will be discouraged from parking within close proximity to the school. Now, I cannot believe that the parents of Eastleigh are going to be any different from parents across the whole of this county. How are we going to discourage them? Parents in my division, they would put Lewis Hamilton to shame in trying to get pole position for a parking space outside the school at the end of the school day. So how are we going to discourage them? There's nothing in this report that says how are we going to discourage them. Parents of pupils that live reasonable distances away from school are going to be referred to local bus timetables. Now, for crying out loud, get real. You know, Chairman, on Friday, I'm taking Mrs. Owen just down the road into Kimberley, but I'm going to try this on when I get home. As soon as I get home, I say, I'm going to tell her, I'm not taking you in the car. Here's the local bus timetable. I'll let you know and committee know how I get on. For goodness sake, get real. I really cannot believe it. And then not only are school staff going to cycle to school with their books balanced on their handlebars, there's an assumption that none of the teaching assistants, and I don't know why teaching assistants are singled out, or very few of the teaching assistants, they're all going to live nearby. Well, I suspect on the salaries that are paid to teaching assistants and the house prices in Eastleigh, that might not be quite the case. And the midday supervisors are going to live by, and therefore the problems will not materialise. Like I say, Chairman, this school is very much needed, and we're almost in a situation where we can't turn it down. But I think the design team need to go away and look at this again with respect to the issues of traffic. And one last suggestion in closing, Chairman, if I may. If nothing else, then at least let us offer the residents in the immediate vicinity and perhaps beyond the facility provided out of this contract for H-bars to be provided across their driveways. Now, I know they can't be enforced by law, but most people do tend to respect them. Doesn't always work, I know, but that would be, if you like, a sop to local residents who will have to suffer. And Councillor Barney may well be here time and time again when this is up, asking us to do something about the parking, or at least at another committee. So we need to think is done and dusted with this one. But we've got to support it because the school places are needed. But I'm sorry to say it really is a lost opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I think that's very clear, and I see urgent notes being written down here about the parking and the traffic, and it's something that we are all familiar with at schools. There's no doubt about it. Do any other members want to come in at this stage? So we'll pick up in a few moments on those, because I suspect there'll be other perhaps similar comments coming in. So Councillor Upton, please.
Very hard act to follow with Councillor Owen's powerful points, but I agree with most of what he said. Yes, I support the application because this school is urgently needed, and Councillor Barney eloquently described the reasons why. It is urgently needed with the significant amount of new housing that's gone on in East Leek. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? I'm not going to repeat what the previous speakers have said, but it's all about the parking that I have a concern, and the lack of this dropping off zone. The hammerhead at Sheep Wash Way needs to be double yellow lines and enforce, and you know, to drive down there and find that you're in a traffic situation where you can't turn, it's going to be an awful nightmare. And I do have concerns about this loop road, particularly on the southeast corner. If you look at Plan 3 on the yellows, I mean, it's almost a right angle. And as Councillor Owen says, the buses may not be infrequent. The point he makes, they may be quite frequent. And I just have a concern how a bus is going to navigate around that loop road with all the bends it's got, particularly the southeast corner, and parking. Yes, it's a 6.75 metre wide highway, which is good, ticks all the boxes, but I have a but there. I think the representative from ARC did say words to the effect that the design is sympathetic to the local community. I think probably 90% of that is true. I just take exception to the point that I don't think the design of the vehicular access and traffic is necessarily sympathetic to the local community. I hope, as has been stated, the local houses will generate the local demand. But as Councillor Owen said, and I endorse, teachers, ancillary staff, whatever, I think they need to have 100% parking provided for them through the nature of the work and what they bring and take away from work, and anything less, I think, is quite frankly foolhardy. So it's my feedback really to the designers on particularly vehicle parking drop-off zones, but I support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Barnfather.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. And it's on exactly the same point, and it's my own point of clarification, because when I raised it before, with all due respect to the officer, he sort of laid the blame off for the lack of a bus pull-in point or drop-off point on Rushcliffe Borough Council. Now, I'm very happy to blame Rushcliffe Borough Council, and indeed the chair of the planning committee of Rushcliffe Borough Council sat next to me. So, you know, more than happy to blame Rushcliffe for this. But actually, if you read the report, it's not Rushcliffe Borough Council, because Rushcliffe Borough Council actually indicated the need for such a drop-off point. And it was indeed our very own Notts County Council Development Control that have advised that it's not necessary. And I just, you know, the statement in the report, the provision of facilities that make travel by car more attractive than non-car based journeys is not considered to be sustainable. So if we don't recognise a problem and don't therefore accommodate that problem, somehow it will go away because we're going to design out the use of motor vehicles. Well, we're not. We're actually designing in a future problem that we could have avoided. And just going back to the last point that I made when I spoke last time, I think the bottom sentence, occupiers would be able to exercise private property rights to control errant parking. You know, we have a responsibility here, and we're just passing that off blithely, I'm afraid, onto residents who will suffer the consequences of our lack of foresight.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Very clear. No other speakers at the moment. Can you come back on these, please, Mr. Marsh? As you can hear, we feel really rather strongly about the highways, the parking, the inconvenience, because we've all been there, haven't we? And we all have cases on our own patches at the moment with issues of school parking. have we really considered this properly enough? And I'm sure ARC are listening to this as well. So can you come back on those points, please, and try and give some hope and reassurance, if possible?
Well, if I could start by commenting on the points raised by Councillor Owen. Councillor Owen had mentioned that there was an expectation of 12 staff parking on the road. That is not the case. The reference to 12 parking spaces being available is the amount of suitable parking space on the highway network, the number of cars which could be accommodated, but it's not the intention that those parking spaces would be for staff. That would be for parents using the public highway for drop-off and pick-up. The application, it is an outline application, and the number of parking spaces is not for consideration as part of this planning application, but there is a recommendation on the number of parking spaces which need to be incorporated in the proposed design, which is 22 spaces for the 210 pupil place school, single form entry, and increasing to 32 spaces for the increase to 420 pupil places. And that is set out in the conditions as to what the minimum is that needs to be provided. The applicant may choose to provide more. With reference to, Councillor made a reference to cycling, the provision which is being made for cycling for staff is 3 spaces. It would offer an opportunity, but the purpose of providing good opportunities for walking and cycling to school is to encourage people to not have to rely on the use of the car. It is somewhat unfortunate in terms of the amount of parking space which is available on Sheepwash Way, and Sheepwash Way is closer to Eastleigh Village Centre, and it is likely to be an attractive route for travel to school. The housing development which has been approved, and I will just make a point that it's not Rushcliffe Borough Council who have got into that position, because both the housing developments were allowed on appeal. So they were originally recommended for refusal by Rushcliffe Borough Council, but they have been allowed on appeal. And the most recent development includes a path which links the David Wilson Homes development with Sheepwash Way. That provides connectivity. The inspector felt that was acceptable because it provided connectivity to Eastleigh Village. But if there is that connectivity and that path goes to the school, it is likely to attract traffic to Sheepwash Way. In terms of paragraph 31, Councillor Owen made reference to things which are included in general statements about travel plans. What we are reporting is what the applicant is saying to us. We are not passing an observation on that at paragraph 31. But the need for a travel plan and the objectives are a matter which are not for consideration in this application, but would come forward in compliance with a condition.
What about the yellow lines and H-bar comments?
The yellow lines. Well, Councillor Upton raised the need for double yellow lines at the turning head on Sheepwash Way. That is something which is highways are saying will be needed, but there may also need to be additional traffic regulation on Sheepwash Way. It isn't necessarily just the provision of a school zone, zigzags outside of a school. If there are particular problems which are identified, then the traffic regulation order may go further than that, but it will be subject to further to public consultation on that traffic regulation order. Councillor Upton also commented on the on Plan 3, I must say that that is diagrammatic, because the Ordnance Survey is not yet up to date in terms of the road construction is not yet in, but the highway which is to be provided would comply with proper highway geometry. So it's not necessarily wholly accurately represented on that plan, but it is a loop road following that general alignment. Well, I'd raised the point earlier in response to the first question asked by Councillor Barnfather, but the housing, the latest housing proposal, which has been approved, does include a private drive, which is next to the proposed school entrance gate, and the location of that, of the access to the school, has been known for some time. It may be it's that close that the school zigzags would extend along the access into that private drive, but that number of plots would be accessed, would be a private drive, and it could not be subject to a traffic regulation order. What the outline planning permissions, the two planning permissions have done is to say, as part of the Section 106 agreement, here is a site of a certain area to build a primary school. The Persimmon Homes site could have come forward as a school in its own right, which is land to the north of and including the belt of trees, with no real means of accessing it other than from the end of Sheepwash Way. I would have thought if we were looking at an application for that development, we'd be looking at something which was particularly problematic in terms of the amount of traffic which would be congregating, circulating around the end of a cul-de-sac. So in that respect, access to the school from the David Wilson, vehicular access to the school from the David Wilson Homes development is the correct location. There have been successive applications by David Wilson Homes, and the latest development, which includes the provision of additional houses outside, immediately next to the school vehicular access gate and to the west of the school, the one which is subject to the Section 106 agreement, is one of I suppose, a replan of the housing development by David Wilson Homes. So I mean, we do have to look at a school development and say this is an application which is for the access and the points of access and the scale of development only, but the detailed design will need to take account of the situation in place at the time when that application comes in to deal with the reserve matters. But the concerns about the proximity of that private drive to the school entrance is noted, and it will be a matter which will be taken up with highways, so that when they look at the traffic regulation order, it's trying to provide the best protection for residents that can be achieved.
Thank you. I think there may be another couple of points coming up because Councillor Creamer indicated. So, Councillor Creamer.
Yes, thank you. It's one point is only slightly political as well. The climate emergency has been declared by this council, and I've had another look through, and I can't see in here. It says on 36 on stage 2, phase 2, sorry, about the parking, etc. But there's no mention of actually having vehicle parking for electric for charging points. And I know we've done that on another school in Rustcliffe, and they've had that. And on the other point, there's no encouragement. And again, because it's just the design stage, that encouragement that we would actually like to see photovoltaics, etc., etc. And unless I've missed that as well. And if I have, it probably needs highlighting a little bit more. But yeah, I know it's going to go to the next design stage. So it would have been nice to see it in here that this is what we'd like to see.
Electric parking and climate.
Well, it's not a matter for consideration in the determination of this application, but there is provision made in the conditions for electric vehicle parking and also for the facilitation of future electric vehicle parking when laying down the car park, that the ducting goes in to make it, you don't have to come back and dig the thing up again. And in terms of the design, the design detail will come in, which may or may not include PV. We don't know, but there are certain elements which we would look at in the building design, although there are elements which have been put forward in the design statement, which I'll just need to, they've been described. I know I referenced them in the introduction on this item. Sorry to keep you.
So we're looking for the design statement on.
Yes, it will be in the.
That's it. Paragraph 20, is that any help? It's the joys of a long report, isn't it? Yeah.
Chair, that may be something which comes up in my next report, but given that this is not an element for consideration in this application, it's something which would come forward in the detailed design.
Exactly. I was just going to make that point because this is an outline application, so the full application will come through at some point fairly soon, I would imagine.
Reserve matters,
yes. Won't it? So,
yes.
Actually, do we know when are we likely to get the full application? Do we have a time scale for that?
In terms of the determination of this application, the reserved matters would have to be submitted within 3 years.
Yes, but the reality is though the school's got to be built in time for next September.
Yes,
so we've got to get this full application in pretty damn quickly, I would have thought, haven't we?
I would expect it to follow on shortly.
Yes. And I'm sure that lots of notes are being taken with regards to what we would like to perhaps add into that detailed application. Right. Do you want anything else? Other things? Probably nothing else to come back on at this stage. Any other members? Any other comments or questions? No. Councillor Fielding, you reserved your right to speak. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I certainly support this application, but I'm somewhat disappointed over the drop-off zone and the issues that we're going to end up with traffic that we could have ironed out.
Thank you. I hope you've all got that parking and traffic is inevitable. I mean, no matter how many people will want to go on foot and cycle, the reality is a lot of staff don't live near their schools they work at. Bus services are not ideal. So there will always be a need for cars, and we've got to keep that in mind. It's essential, really. So I think hopefully you've got that. So we better make a decision unless there's any other speakers. I think we've got the recommendation before us and the comments we've made. Better go to a vote, please. Can I have a show of hands for everyone in favour? Which I think is probably unanimous. Oh no, maybe not, I'm assuming. And anyone against? Any abstentions? No, so it is. That's unanimous. Thank you. I wasn't sure if a hand had gone up. Sorry about that. Right. So a touch of deja vu here, but we'll move on to the Bingham application. This is the full application for land off Windnall Drive, Bingham, for the construction of a 315-place primary school. And Mr. Marsh again. No, it's all right. Don't worry.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a 1.5 hectare site lying between Windnall Drive and Dunsmore Road, part of a residential estate development under construction between Chapel Lane and Foss Way, Bingham. The site lies approximately 850 metres to the north-northwest of Bingham town centre. The school site has a frontage to Dunsmore Avenue, which will be the main east-west route and a bus route through the residential estate linking Chapel Lane with the old A46. The wider residential estate comprises a planned development of up to 1,050 houses, and this generates demand for 220 pupil places. The site for a primary school is located at the centre of the development, adjacent to a retail centre and community centre site. The proposed school site is generally flat. A mature area of woodland lies to the north, separated by a strip of land which will form a path linking Dunsmore Avenue to a southward extension of Windnall Drive. An area of open space around a balancing pond lies to the north of the woodland. A ditch on the western boundary of the school site is currently being realigned as part of housing development to the west. Land to the south of the school site is being raised by approximately 1 metre, and housing has been approved that will have rear gardens facing onto the school. The relevant planning history of the site and surrounding development is set out in paragraphs 7 to 10 of the report. Planning permission is sought to construct a single-storey 315-place primary school in 2 phases, with 210 places provided in the first phase. A 26-place nursery would be provided as part of the phase 1 development. The finished floor level of the building would be approximately 0.5 metres above the existing site level. Classrooms would be provided either side of a central corridor, with the school, hall, kitchen and plant room provided towards the western end of the building. The overall length of the phase 1 development would be 80 metres, with a span of 19.4 metres and a ridge of 4.5 metres. The school hall would be the tallest element, with a monopitch roof varying between 6 metres and 5.4 metres in height. The building elevations would be principally an off-white coloured silicon render finish above a red brick plinth, with all brick panels identifying building entry points, the west and the majority of the south-facing elevations of the hall, kitchens and plant area. The roof, aluminium window frames and doors would be coloured dark grey. Sustainable features would be incorporated in the building design, including high efficiency electricals and lighting, air source heat pumps, high levels of thermal insulation and air tightness, mechanical ventilation with zoned air quality management and natural ventilation. A canopy and early years outdoor play area would be provided to the north of the building. Playing fields would be provided to the south, with a porous surfaced hard play area provided towards the southwest corner of the site. The pedestrian entrance to the school would be from the path running along the northern school boundary that will link Dunsmore Avenue and Windnall Drive. The path would need to be suitable for use by both pedestrians and cyclists, and constructed with a bound surface and lit. Vehicle access to the school would be from the southern extension to Widnall Drive, and is being constructed as part of the culverting and realignment of the watercourse on the western school boundary by Barratt Homes. 22 car parking spaces, including 2 disability spaces, would be provided. 2 electric vehicle charging points are to be provided. A sprinkler tank with pump housing would be sited on the southern side of the car park and enclosed by vertical hit and miss boarding up to 3.5 metres in height. Covered cycle parking for 40 cycles would be provided in a secured area overlooked from the school entrance and adjacent offices. The school perimeter will be enclosed by green-coloured 2.4 metre high Harris security fencing. Taking account of levels relative to the houses to be erected to the south, a 3 metre high timber fence would be erected on the boundary at the southern end of the area of outdoor hard play. The Harris fencing will be increased to 3 metres in height at the eastern end of the southern boundary in the position indicated on this plan. The effective height of the enclosures will be 2.4 metres when viewed from the housing plots. An indicative landscape scheme proposes hedge planting on the eastern and western school boundaries, with a hedge being provided along the northern boundary as part of a planning permission granted by Rushcliffe Borough Council referenced at paragraph 9. Tree planting is proposed to the north of the school building, within the site to the frontage to Dunsmore Avenue and to the west of the area of outdoor hard play. In phase 2, the building will be extended by approximately 20 metres on its eastern end, adding 4 additional classrooms and as the school expands to 315 pupil places. The application is supported by a transport assessment which estimates that for the initial one-form entry school, there would be 26 vehicles dropping off on Dunsmore Avenue and 17 dropping off on the extension to Widnall Drive in the morning peak. In the phase 2 expansion to 1.5 form entry, it is anticipated that there will be 37 vehicles dropping off on Dunsmore Avenue and 24 dropping off on the extension to Widnall Drive in the morning peak. The extension to Widnall Drive is being constructed at 6 metres in width, and both roads are of sufficient width to enable traffic to safely pass any parked vehicles. Construction would take place using a single point of access on the site frontage to Dunsmore Avenue, north of the bus lay-by. The main issues in determining this application are the impacts of traffic and short-term parking on the highway network close to the school entrance, and the impact of site activity from outdoor play on future neighbouring properties. The school would benefit from the pedestrian entrance being approached from 2 directions, either from Widnall Drive to the west or Dunsmore Avenue. NCC Highways Development Control have confirmed that the highway has been designed with the known location of the school in mind, and the carriageway of Widnall Drive at 6 metres in width is satisfactory. There are significant lengths of highway to the north of the school, adjacent to the balancing ponds, that would allow parents to park without detracting from amenity or causing annoyance to neighbouring residents. The area of outdoor hard play adjacent to the southwest of the site is the outdoor area that would be used most intensively for short periods during school breaks. Use of the area has the potential to give rise to noise nuisance to neighbouring occupiers. However, this is to be suitably mitigated through the proposed acoustic fencing to be erected on the southern boundary adjacent to housing plot 99. Areas of grass playing field will be used less intensively and are likely to be more frequently used for organised and supervised school activity. Adjacent occupiers would be able to erect their own fencing or other treatment on the boundary of the school, either to reduce noise or to increase privacy, although some future residents may appreciate a view over the school playing fields for which the majority of the time would not be in use. Matters which have been raised by consultees are considered in the report and are incorporated in the recommended conditions. It is recommended the planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1, Chair.
Thank you very much. And do any members have any questions or points of clarification at this stage? No. Okay, so we'll move on to we have our speaker, a guest speaker on this as well. Is this Mr. Ralph again? So, Mr. Ralph from ARC Partnership, if you'd like to address us, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. A bit of deja vu again. In support of the project, I wish to provide a short statement, re the design philosophy and the build on the report delivered by planning officers. We've worked with council officers and stakeholders to design and ensure the application accurately captures and reflects both the provision of school places as well as the council's wider aspirations for sustainable and environmentally conscious development. In designing Bingham School, we have looked at balancing and assessing the capital costs of materials against longer-term value with the need for robust, long-lasting specifications of products with low or zero maintenance, with the aim of lowering revenue, operating and maintenance costs. Consideration to energy conservation include ensuring high levels of insulation, airtightness and well-considered details to minimise thermal bridging. Use of good natural daylighting, sensor-controlled LED lighting, electrical vehicle charging, together with expansion for electrical vehicle charging in the future, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery in winter as well as natural ventilation. Summer comfort will be achieved through passive cooling with high-spec glass, landscape screening and shading as well as natural ventilation. Creating the right comfortable and internal environment are of course all conducive to good learning. Regarding low carbon solutions, particularly in light of the climate emergency, Bingham Primary School will help set an example for a fully electric building which will form part of the council's contribution to the journey towards a zero carbon future once the grid is eventually decarbonised. As someone very wise once said, we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. What better example to show our younger generation our commitment to their and the planet's future? Of course, the building is wider than just the project is wider than just the building. It's the environment. And again, sustainable travel and encouragement of pedestrian and cycle connectivity is a key aspect of the project. And through school travel plans can help to educate and encourage a shift in the future and reduce traffic in the long term, along with associated health and well-being benefits. The importance again of the site's biodiversity support the wildlife transition from mature copse again to trim trails and play areas, and will also help deliver a comprehensive and well-rounded project. We've also embedded, obviously, a lot of wildlife features in terms of supporting nesting boxes, bat boxes within the actual fabric of the building. Education is a key part and can play a key role in all aspects of the project, from showing youngsters how technology is used as part of the design process, the on-site activities of how buildings are constructed and put together, understanding waste recycling, as well as considerations for dismantling and reuse. Thank you. We look forward to seeking your support and help making the project a success, delivering much needed school places, as well as meeting the wider environmental and sustainable aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any points of clarification to raise at this stage? No? Okay, thank you. So I'll formally move the recommendations on page 165. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Fielding.
Second, I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. So open up for discussion and debate. And the first hand is Councillor Owen, then Councillor Upton, then Councillor Barfather, please.
Yeah, thank you once again, Chairman. And again, for the sake of transparency, I declare the same sort of interest as I did for the previous one, because I was lobbied and I've had a lot of work behind the scenes in this application coming forward. And of course, once again, we need to support it, but nevertheless, it's worse than deja vu, Chairman, because if you look at paragraph 48, it says the proposed parking is lower than that which has previously been provided on other new schools elsewhere in the county. So not only are we not learning, well, I don't know whether you call it reverse learning. I don't know what sort of learning it is. That we've got a problem, so we're going to try and make it even worse by not having sufficient car parking spaces for the members of staff that are going to be working there. And we're told that there is sufficient space on street to cater for a small degree of overspill parking. Well, if we're not building enough parking spaces on site, then those car parking spaces are going to be filled by staff working at the school, making it even worse when parents want to come and drop off and pick up. And I think that's unacceptable. We're told in the report that the entrance is going to be in an area where there are not many housing frontages, therefore there will be no adverse effect on local residents because people won't be parking outside of their houses. Well, that space is already going to be filled, as the report says, by overspill parking from the school. And you also have to bear in mind that schools not only have just the staff working there, but they have visitors. Councillors, for example, go and will want to park. All sorts of external agencies will be going to and from the school. So that has not been taken into consideration, so it would seem. But I seem to remember this idea of expecting parking to take place in an area around the school that wasn't going to have too much in the way of housing frontages. This was the case at the new school in Hucknall, the Flying High Academy. And I noted recently, some weeks ago, that there were complaints about the level of parking and the issues with parking there. So that is not an answer. Paragraph 50 is an interesting one. Our previous experience with new school sites shows it is often difficult to predict how parents will park. Well, why don't you come and ask us as elected members? Because I think we could all tell you they'll park as close to the school entrance as they possibly can. And despite this wonderful modal shift that is going to take place, they'll still be parking there in 10, 20, 30 years' time, albeit they'll probably be in electrically powered vehicles, but they'll still be there. So we've got the experience, even if you haven't. So please consult with elected members and then you'll get the answers that you don't want. School travel plans are also going to take care of this. I've sat at more meetings as drawing up school travel plans we're going to save the planet, going to save all the parking issues. Again, an utter load of nonsense. You just write it down and then it's put in a tray and it's ticked an appropriate box. And I make one final appeal once again that for the properties in the vicinity that we as part of the contract provide H-bars. At least we can show a little something that we have listened to the concerns and have tried to do something. The problem won't go away, but I regret it's a lost opportunity yet again. We are building in a problem, or at least we're building in a making of worse of the problem that will exist. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Again, rapid notes have been made here, but before we come back on those, we'll go to Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a strategic housing site and it's progressing well. I drove past it the other day and the school is certainly needed in this location and I have no problems with that. But again, without rehearsing all the detail, it's the traffic management, the parking and the overspill on street parking and the lack of a dropping off zone that concerns me. Also, I mean, just looking back at the previous application, and I quote for the Eastleigh School in item 2, 6.75 metre width is, and I quote, the designed width for roads passing schools. So if it's 6.75 for Eastleigh, how come it's 6 metres for Bingham? I just leave that. But when you look at plan number 4 on the yellow pages, Widnall Drive, it does have to me what I would say is fairly dense housing opposite the school vehicular entrance. In my way of thinking, it's got semi-detached houses and a terrace of 3 houses directly on that road of 6 metres width, immediately along Widnall Drive in front of the school main vehicular entrance. So a statement there, but again, I'd be interested in a comment from the officers why, as I say, 6.75 is the design width for roads passing schools in East Leek, but a lesser width for Bingham. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Barnfather, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry because I am only here as a substitute and I apologise. But some of the comments that I made earlier and I'll make now, I've made from the chair that you're sat in. So I am being consistent. Rushcliffe Borough Council make the same recommendation again. So Councillor Upton is absolved of any responsibility. Consideration should be given to a dedicated vehicular drop-off pick-up zone outside of the school, including for buses and coaches. Councillor Neil Clark, the local member, parent drop-off and pick-up will be a problem. A large proportion of pupils will be travelling some distance or from across main roads and will likely travel by car. We have some reference to the school, and I have to say I echo everything that Councillor Owen said about school travel plans. Having been a school governor for over 20 years, the chair of both primary and secondaries, I've sat in on the devising of more school travel plans than SOFMIC. And can I say, they are a paper exercise because they attract funding, we design them, they don't work. They sit on a shelf gathering dust because they're designed by the staff and governors with the support of officers that parents don't relate to them. That's a simple fact. Parents do not relate to them. Parents will do what is best for them and for their children. So we still design our school travel plans and our parking. And I won't repeat what's been said about the staff parking because to me there's a clear deficiency here. But we design things on the basis of what we would like to see instead of what we all know will happen. And that's, to me, that is utter cloud cuckoo land. So it's exactly the same. The staff shortage in staff car parking. I have 2 schools within Ravenshead parish, 2 primary schools. One of them has exactly the same deficiency of staff car parking. One doesn't. The one that doesn't have that deficiency, I get no complaints by and large about parking outside of school. The one that has 10 staff cars parked from 7:45 in the morning in a line outside the school, which means that parents cannot drop off easily, whether they wish to or not. We've built in a problem that is not going to go away. We've had applications before this committee before. We had an application, I forget the name of the school, I'm sure officers will be able to remind me, in Councillor Saddington's division. We designed, and I thought this is the start of something good. We designed a proper school drop-off, bus drop-off zone at that school. We had an application, and I can't remember the name of the school, perhaps, I'm sure Mr. Mark, thank you, indeed it was. We designed Digby College on Digby Avenue, and we designed a drop-off point. Now, people will say, well, that was a special school, so special circumstances dictate. But arguably, actually, children who arrive on a bus to a special school have more or less one-to-one supervision, and you could say there is less need for a drop-off point. There is more probably need for a drop-off point where children are less supervised and are more likely to run into the road. So we just, again, I don't know what we have to do to get over this problem. And I understand that when officers are designing schools and sites and when ARC, acting on our behalf, are designing those schools and sites, they have to deal with the amount of land that is available to them. And I hear Mr. Marsh loud and clear when he says that. Well, maybe we do go back to Rushcliffe Borough Council and say, give us more land in that Section 106 agreement so that we can design schools for the future. I managed to get you in somewhere there, Roger. So we can design schools that properly accommodate the issues that we know we're going to face and are properly future-proofed. Can I say, just in relation to Mr. Ralph's presentation, I absolutely agree. There is much to like about the design of this school. It is the building itself, fantastic. The facilities, fantastic, future-proofed. But we come back to that same perennial problem: school transport and parental drop-off and staff parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Councillor Camilleri, please.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of moral blackmail that the developers and planners use. I support the need for a primary school, but I could say if there was another kind of planning put before us from another development and the parking problems that it's caused, it would get turned down out of hand and it wouldn't move forward. The fact that we have to vote these through because we need primary schools, children need schooling, but I think somewhere along the line, we're going to have to turn one of these down until they get the planning right. They know when it comes here, it's going to be a problem. Again, it's not rocket science. You put 400 pupils there, you're going to get so many cars, they're going to cause havoc, they're going to ignore double yellow lines, they're going to ignore everything. I go to a doctor's at Rainworth, and when the school is open in the morning, they take over the car park. You can't get in. People can't get. They do not care. So when you design a school, you should be designing in how people are going to park. And if you can't get it right, don't bring it here, because one day we're going to turn it down. And I think that we've sat here to listen to two applications. I mean, the school, be honest, sounds fantastic. I don't know, there's no solar panels in it. I didn't hear that. Is it? Just a quick one.
Sorry, Councillor. Yes, we haven't included it. Obviously, we had to balance it against capital costs, but what we have done is design the structure to take account of that for the future.
But what I'm saying is, that's what we should be discussing. Is it right? Is it in line with our emergency climate thing? We're not discussing that. We're discussing car parking. And you know we're going to discuss car parking, and you know that we're going to pass it anyway. So we're going to have to get it in the future, because the next time this comes to here, and if I'm on the planning and they haven't got the parking right, I will actually vote against it.
Thank you very much. If you turn your microphone off, of course, making it clear here, you are not predetermining any future applications that you may or may not be discussing.
No, but what I'm saying is, sorry, Chair, I'm not predetermining it, but we've got to think forward. They can't just keep coming along with the same kind of plans and we keep passing it, because it's the residents that pay the price.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but I just needed to make that point for clarity. Right, no other speakers at the moment. You've probably heard enough already, but I would also point out the report from Councillor Clark on page 157, paragraph 78, which is picking up on all the points that we've just heard about. So I think, Mr. Marsh, you have the pleasure now of coming back on those and defending, call it what you will, or commenting on the points. Main points being the question about H-bars. What's the difference between Eastleigh and Bingham regarding the width of the road, 6.75 metres and 6 metres, and you might want to talk about travel plans and also the question about drop-off points. So nothing new, nothing unusual for you there. It's all déjà vu, but if you'd like to come back, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and go through the points, but if any of the members feel that I've not commented on that point, please let me know. Councillor Owen mentioned about parking being designed to accommodate overspill on the highway for staff. That's not the case. The proposal accommodates on-site parking for staff and visitors, and as at all schools, there are parents who bring their children to school by car. That is the issue that is causing a lot of concern. In this particular case at Bingham, it's perhaps better than other proposals in that the school site is next to, there is a retail site to the east, which will have parking at that. There could be an opportunity for parents to park there, but it would be on private land. It would not be on the public highway. We have schools elsewhere where, there's one in Hucknall where that happens. Retailers quite often are happy for someone to come and pick up the child and go to the shop while they're there at the same time. So there's opportunities for parking off the highway. And in this particular case, the plan which is included at plan 11, plan 10 of the papers, that identifies areas of the future public highway which would be available for parking. And we have to bear in mind where the pedestrian entrance gate is. People are going to want to park in a convenient location so that they can pick up their child from the path. So it's not as if they can drive to the school gate. They would have to get walk along the path to get to the school entrance gate. But there are two balancing ponds to the north of on Widnall Drive. There will be no frontage development on there. That has quite significant capacity for on-street parking without causing amenity impacts. It was, I think, Councillor Upton who referred to the housing which is opposite. There would be an expectation that parking would take account of gaps on that highway frontage, but there is a frontage to the school there where people could park opposite those properties. The point about H-bars, it is something which can be picked up in a traffic regulation order, but it is not enforceable. But I think the members are aware of that. The width of the road, yes, I anticipated this question being asked, so I have asked Highways Development Control, why are the two roads of different width? And it's to do with the highway design guide, which was in place at the time when the permissions were granted for the developments. So they're saying that the standard for this development at Bingham is a 6 metre wide road. The one at Eastleigh is 6.75 metres. But they're saying that it is still appropriate for a school, because in this particular case, the school site's at the centre of the whole development overall, and it's been known where the school site was going to be, so they've been able to factor that into the design of the highway. Parking problems at schools, which Councillor Barnfather has raised again, also Councillor Camilleri. The problem with parking, the operational requirements of the school in terms of staff and visitor parking need to be met by the on the development site itself. What we've also got are the parents bringing their children to and from school and parking in a convenient location. Ideally, we want to encourage people not to travel by car. And this particular proposal has a pedestrian access point which is not onto a highway frontage. So it does encourage people to, they are going to have to walk. So it's not as if they can drive to the school gate. The parking there will be parking on the public highway at school pickup and drop-off times. That's in term time. It's for relatively short periods at the beginning and end of the school day. And when we discuss this with Highways Development Control, what they're looking at is this safe? And they're not saying to us that there is a particular problem in terms of highway safety with vehicles being parked on a public highway, as long as they park in accordance with any required traffic regulation. Are there any other points?
No, I think that's covered most of the points. The issue of travel plans. Did you just want to, because there's a certain amount of scepticism, shall we say, about travel plans?
Yes.
What do we think about that?
Well, travel plans are something which the government encourages, and we're tasked with when we deal with these sorts of developments to get school buy-in to the provision of a travel plan. So the school need to be aware, well, I'm sure they are aware of traffic issues around schools. They have to play their part in helping to trying to reduce that. They can do that through both the education of children and parents. But they are subject, or should be subject to regular review, and that is set out in the recommended conditions.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Barnfather.
Sorry, Chair. Mr. Marsh is in a difficult position here because he's the front of house man. You know, when you're in a restaurant and you complain about something, it's the poor old waiter or waitress who gets the grief. It's not the chef in the kitchen who you never see sight of. Highways Development Control have been the advisors in both these applications and in previous applications. It all goes back to Mr. Marsh is effectively in a position that he has to accept what Highways Development Control tell him. That's, you know, part and parcel of the different roles and responsibilities. Might I just suggest that as the chair of this committee, you might want to invite Highways Development Control to listen to the debate that's occurred today. And it may be that it's something for the future that Highways Development Control be invited to attend this committee and actually hear the views of members. Because, you know, I feel for Mr. Marsh because the next school application that comes before this committee, and God forbid that I won't be substituting on that occasion, but I'm sure he's going to get exactly the same arguments put to him, and he is, you know, trying to defend, in my opinion, what is the indefensible.
That's very helpful, Councillor Barnfather, and indeed I was going to make a similar point that we're not getting at Mr. Marsh here, and as you quite rightly say, and it's doing a job. Mrs. Gill wants to come in on this, but I was going to make the point that time and time again it seems to be Highways Development Control that seems to put officers and members in what can only be described as a less than perfect position. And I hope at the very least that message is going to get across to them somehow, because as sure as eggs are eggs, as Councillor Barnfather says, we will no doubt be having similar discussions in the future. But Mrs. Gill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, councillors, we will. I will arrange for my team manager, Highways Development Control, to attend committee. And one thing that we've done a number of times over the years is give members a detailed presentation about what we can and can't do in terms of highway responses on applications that come to this committee and responses that we also send back to the districts. And over recent months, we have got a new highways design guide, so it's perhaps appropriate now we've got a new committee to come and talk to you about that and talk to you about responding to applications. So we'll be very pleased to take up that invitation.
Thank you, and I'm sure committee would welcome that opportunity and be very grateful. I know I will be. And I was also going to bring in the issue of common sense, you know, and the department of the obvious type of thing. But I'm sure we will have those discussions with Highways. I don't think there's any other speakers. Councillor Fielding, you reserve your right to speak.
I'm fine with that, but I welcome us having the highways along. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much. Well, I think we've covered a lot of points there. There's probably no need to come back. I think colleagues have got the message loud and clear. So shall we make a decision, go to a vote? All those in favour, please show. And to confirm, thank you. Anyone against? And any abstentions? No. So that's carried unanimously. But I'm sure that you will also be feeding back comments to colleagues who need to hear what we feel really quite strongly about. I think it's fair to say. But thank you. So the final application for today is at the beginning of your agenda, which is Harworth Colliery, importation of 3.6 million cubic metres of restoration materials. There's a bit of movement going on. We'll just wait for. You're very welcome to stay if you want to, but. Thank you very much for contributions. So, Mr. Hankin, you're going to talk us through Harworth, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose I ought to start and now for something completely different. It's to consider a plan application for the importation of 3.6 million cubic metres of inert waste over a 14-year period to the former Harworth Colliery spoilt heap to provide for the restoration of the site. The application site incorporates the former Harworth Colliery spoil tip, which is located approximately 1.2 kilometres to the south of Harworth town. The colliery tip has a site area of 109 hectares. It is bordered on its western boundary by the A1M motorway, by Blythe Road on its eastern boundary, Selby Road to the northern boundary, and farmland on the southern boundary. Vehicle access to the site is from Blythe Road. The colliery tip is elevated in relation to the surrounding land, having a maximum height of around 77 metres above ordnance datum, in comparison to the surrounding land, which is typically has ground levels of between 15 and 35 metres. The Harworth Colliery spoil tip historically benefited from planning permission for the disposal of colliery waste, which was used to re-engineer the topography of the site and resulted in the formation of a mounded landform. However, following the closure of the colliery in 2006 and the cessation of spoil disposal on Harworth Colliery tip, the tip remains in a partially constructed landform with a deficit of 8.4 million cubic metres of material required to complete the approved tipping scheme in compliance with the approved site contours. The current landform of the spoil tip does not provide for a satisfactory restoration of the site. The colliery waste is exposed and has been capped off, and this is resulting in contaminated surface water flows from the site and potential stability issues. Areas of standing water are also prominent on the colliery tip, which is a concern in terms of the stability of the tip. In 2016, Nottinghamshire County Council served a breach of condition enforcement notice requiring the landowner to restore the colliery tip. In terms of the proposed development, full planning permission is sought to complete the restoration of Harworth Colliery to a revised restoration design using 3.6 million cubic metres of imported inert waste materials. Planning permission was originally sought for the restoration of the site using 6.2 million cubic metres of mixed waste, including some non-inert waste, but this was reduced to 3.6 at the request of officers. The infilling works would be undertaken in 3 phases over an anticipated 14-year period, with the imported inert waste being used to build up levels over the central area of former slurry lagoons to provide a permanent cap to the site and create shallow gradients in an east-west direction to enable surface water to naturally drain from the colliery tip. Site levels of the restored site would be up to 17 metres lower than would otherwise have been the case if the approved colliery tipping scheme was completed, and up to 13 metres lower than the 6.2 million cubic metre scheme originally sought planning permission. The restoration scheme would retain the existing woodland around the outer edges of the site, with additional areas of woodland and grassland habitats being provided as part of the restoration of the site. Following restoration, the site would receive 10 years aftercare management. Vehicle access for waste deliveries would be via the existing site entrance off Blythe Road, which is approximately 1.2 kilometres to the north of the A1. There would be an average of 64 HGV deliveries each working day. In terms of the council's consultations, the application has been subject to 4 rounds of planning consultation, coinciding with the original submission and 3 subsequent submissions of further information. We've received no objections to the plan application from any of the statutory consultees. Bawtry Town Council have requested lorry routing to be controlled to restrict delivery vehicles passing through Bawtry. Stirrup and Oldcoats Parish Council have asked for delivery traffic to be routed away from their village and have also requested no public access is provided
across the restored site. Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust have objected on the basis that they consider the plan application is supported by inadequate survey details to properly consider the ecological effects of the development, and they raise concern about loss of skylark habitat, loss of wintering bird habitat, impacts of noise on wildlife, impacts to amphibians and reptiles, and loss of orchids and hedgerows. The council received 6 letters of representation and objection from local residents, raising concerns about the working hours, noise, dust, traffic, amount of waste materials imported, and the delay in restoring the site following the closure of the colliery. In terms of the planning considerations, the key issues raised through the assessment of the plan application relate to the need to restore the colliery tip, the quantity of waste material importation to the site, the availability of waste to undertake the restoration works, the minimisation of environmental impacts, including drainage, hydrological effects, traffic impacts, visual and landscape effects, heritage effects, ecological considerations, and amenity considerations, including noise and dust. In terms of the need to restore the site, the retention of the colliery tip in its current unrestored condition is not environmentally acceptable. The uncapped colliery spoil results in contaminated acidic surface water discharging from the site. The topography of the site restricts its ability to discharge surface water, resulting in contaminated discharges to groundwater. The tip has previously experienced minor slope failure, and the visual appearance of the site is unsatisfactory. As I mentioned before, enforcement action has been initiated by the council to secure the restoration of the colliery tip. The scheme under consideration within this plan application has been drawn up following negotiations to enable the site to be restored. In terms of planning policy, Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS5, which concerns itself with disposal sites for hazardous, non-hazardous and inert waste, is supportive of disposal schemes on former colliery tips, where the waste assists with the restoration of despoiled land and provides environmental benefits. Since the imported waste will assist in addressing the mining legacy issues of the site regarding contaminated drainage and stability, it is concluded that development is supported by Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS5. In terms of the quantity of waste required to restore the site, there is a need to import waste to enable the former lagoon area to be re-engineered and to create drainage falls and overcome issues with surface and groundwater contamination. The Environment Agency have confirmed in their consultation response that the do-nothing scenario would not be acceptable due to the impacts that the site presently has in terms of groundwater and surface water quality. As part of the assessment of the plan application, a series of different restoration options have been considered, including a do-nothing scenario, a scheme to simply put a membrane over the site to cap it, stop water flowing into the site, and schemes involving the importation of 1.7, 3.6, 4.3, 5.3, 6.2 and 8.4 million cubic metres. The 3.6 the 3.6 scheme is considered to provide the optimum solution between the restoration benefits in comparison to the quality of waste imported to the site, and it represents a 40% reduction to the 6.2 million scheme and a 55% reduction in waste compared to the 8.4 scheme. In terms of the availability of waste materials to undertake the restoration of the site, the scheme would utilise substantial quantities of waste over a long duration, and it raises questions in terms of whether there is sufficient waste available in the local area to carry out the restoration scheme in the time frame proposed. The remoteness of the Harworth Colliery site in relation to Nottingham and Mansfield areas, where inert waste horizons are most likely to be generated, together with the large scale of the scheme, raises some level of uncertainty that the facility would source sufficient quantity of waste to complete the scheme in the planned 14 years, and thus satisfy the policy test set out within the Waste Local Plan Policy W42 and Minerals Local Plan Policy DM12, which require developers to provide satisfactory evidence to show that sufficient waste material is likely to be available to achieve the restoration of the site within an acceptable timescale. If this application was refused planning permission on this basis, this would preclude the restoration of the former colliery tip, leading to unsatisfactory retention of an unrestored colliery tip in its current form and the adverse impacts to surface and groundwater quality. It would also mean that the landowner could not comply with the breach condition enforcement notice, and therefore a balanced judgment needs to be reached on these two potentially competing policy positions. It's officers' view that the need to restore the site and achieve compliance with Minerals Local Plan Policy DM12 outweighs concerns that sufficient waste would be available to the developer to carry out the restoration works in the proposed timescale, and the conflict that this may raise in terms of compliance with Waste Local Plan Policy W42. The planning assessment demonstrates that imported inert waste materials would be beneficially used to enhance the environmental quality of the unrestored site and address the site's mining legacy, and thus, for the purposes of this planning assessment, and without prejudice to any decision taken by the Environment Agency at the permitting stage, the scheme is considered to be a recovery activity and supported by Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS3 and National Planning Policy for Waste Policy. In terms of the environmental effects of the development, Minerals Local Plan Policy DM1 and Waste Core Strategy Policy WCS13 are supportive of developments where the environmental impacts are considered to be acceptable. In terms of looking at those environmental impacts, with respect to odour, vermin and landfill gas, modifications have been made to the composition of the waste materials to be used for the restoration of the site, restricting them to strictly clean inert waste materials and thus addressing concerns previously identified regarding the potential for contaminated discharges of leachate and issues relating to odour, vermin and landfill from the use of more mixed waste streams. In terms of water quality, the restoration of the site would provide a permanent solution to improve water quality flows from the site, and the development is therefore supported by Minerals Local Plan Policy DM2 and Waste Local Plan Policies W35 and W36. In terms of the visual impact, the restoration works will be undertaken within the central area of the site, and they enable the retention of the perimeter landscape planting, which provide an effective visual screen of the restoration works and minimise the visual effect of the development on surrounding settlements and properties. Significant visual and landscape impacts are therefore not anticipated. In terms of the ecological effects, the existing habitat where the restoration works would be undertaken is dominated by species-poor, semi-improved grassland, which is generally of a low conservation value. The ecological mitigation scheme which supports the plan application ensures that any impacts to habitats and species are appropriately protected, and following the restoration of the site enhanced to provide a net biodiversity gain in accordance with the various policy tests. In terms of the heritage considerations, the proposals would increase the visual presence of the central section of the former colliery tip, and that it would be visible from a number of heritage assets, most notably Silby Hall, a Grade 1 listed building and its parkland. The Planning and Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990 requires the planning authority to have special regard to any heritage impacts, but in this instance, it's assessed the level of harm to the heritage asset is minor and outweighed by the benefits derived from the development, notably the restoration of an unrestored colliery tip. In terms of the highway effects, the highway effects have been fully assessed as part of the traffic assessment and demonstrate that the development would not give rise to unacceptable levels of congestion or capacity issues on the proposed lorry route. The HGV traffic would be regulated by a recommended Section 106 agreement to ensure access to the site would be from the south and thus avoid travelling through Harworth and Burcoats town centre and surrounding villages. In terms of noise emissions, the level of noise emissions have been calculated in accordance with industry methodology, and this demonstrates that the works would be undertaken within the limits set out within national planning practice guidance, and no significant detrimental noise impacts are anticipated. The scheme also provides for the satisfactory management of dust. Overall, it is concluded that the revised 3.6 million cubic metre scheme would appropriately provide for the restoration and aftercare of the unrestored former colliery tip within acceptable environmental limits. The restoration of the site would create a mosaic of woodland, scrub, grassland and wetland habitats to reflect the character of semi-natural habitats in the vicinity, and it would enable public access, which is not in conflict with other uses of the site for grazing and nature conservation. The recommendation, therefore, is to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 2 of the report, and the applicant entering into a Section 106 agreement to regulate lorry routing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin. Do any members have any questions or for points of clarification at this stage? No? OK, thank you. So we have a guest speaker on this application, Mr. Ball. Craig Ball, you're the agent for the applicant, I think. So thank you for sitting through the other two items we had earlier on. So I'm sure you've got a feel as to how long you have to speak and what we have to do. And so as soon as you're ready, if you'd like to address the committee, please.
Thank you, Chair. We're pleased to know there is plenty of parking on this site as well. So, thank you. Yeah, my name is Craig Ball. I'm the planning agent representing the Harworth Group, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Firstly, we must commend the planning officer's report. It is thorough, properly balanced, and reflects the careful and detailed consideration of the application that has taken place. This is a mining legacy site in Nottinghamshire and the final colliery tip, we believe, to be restored. As Mr. Hankin has pointed out, the existing condition of the site is not satisfactory, and the retention of the site in its current condition is not environmentally acceptable, and changes to the topography of the site are required to make it sustainable in the long term. The company have held extensive and positive discussions with officers in seeking to deliver an acceptable restoration scheme, which we feel now is in front of members for consideration. Whilst we accept the site is remote from the main urban area of Nottingham, we are confident that the site's location, adjacent to the A1, will attract sufficient restoration materials from Nottinghamshire and beyond to deliver the restoration of the site within the 15-year time period. The Harworth Group have got a contractor interested in taking this site forward. With this in mind, the development has been planned in a phased manner to minimise disturbance of the operations and enable the phased restoration of the site. Furthermore, the restoration scheme will provide a permanent solution to mitigate the adverse water quality discharges from the site, resulting in improvements in surface and groundwater flows from the site. The ecological mitigation for the site would involve a 15-year management programme of the retained habitats on site from the commencement of development, with a further 10 years of aftercare for all the newly created habitats on site following restoration. These measures reflect the importance and commitment of the applicant to the successful delivery of the restoration scheme. The potential environmental effects of the proposal have been considered, and there are no objections from technical consultees, which would suggest that the proposal should not proceed. In fact, for this scale of development, there are very few letters of representation against the scheme. We consider that the impacts of the operation will be satisfactorily controlled by the imposition of a comprehensive set of planning conditions, including requirements for both a noise and dust action plan. Clearly, we support the recommendation and respectfully ask the committee to grant planning permission, subject to appropriate conditions. In doing so, we can confirm the company's commitment to continue to liaise and work with both the council and the local community to properly control the operation of the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ball, and that was just within time as well. So thank you for that. Do any members or officers have any questions, points of clarifications at this stage? No. OK, thank you. So I'll formally move the recommendation, which is on page 58 of your pack. And can I have a seconder, please, Councillor Fielding?
Formally seconded, reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. So we'll open the floor up for discussion, debate, and Councillor Owen first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It seems to me that this is a no-brainer. Well, you know, why on earth wouldn't we want to go with this? I have to say, when I first started to read the report and I saw the number of vehicle movements that were envisaged, I did have some concerns. But then when I read the report, and I would make the point to officers, some of us do actually read reports, I noticed that there were no objections at all. And the local communities up there clearly know what they want. They know what the issues are. And they say, basically saying to us, get on with it, get it done. And we're not worried about the proposed vehicle movements. In fact, the only objection that I can see is at 97 on page 19 of the report, which is the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Now, I look forward to the day when we get an application when the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust don't raise an objection. I think it'll be a first. Now, as you said, there's plenty of parking unless you're a Skylark wanting to overwinter, and you misled us there. You didn't mention that. I mean, really, come on. Are we meant? They don't. Are we really meant to take them seriously when they come up with this sort of thing? For goodness' sake, let's get on with it. Let's get it restored. Let's get it looking nice. And I think actually we can leave nature to do it itself rather than have to go in for extensive management plans. I just wonder how nature's managed all these millions of years without interfering wildlife trusts and people like that wanting to manage things. OK, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Your points about one of the consultees are noted, but of course they have every right to make their point, and they will have their view, or any observer will have their views, which may or may not correlate with other people's views. But Councillor Fielding, please.
Thank you, Chair. I too welcome this report. For within the division I represent, we have a reclaimed pit, which has absolutely flourished, and I'm sure the community of Haworth and Burcoats look forward to the day when this is fully restored, and this is the means to be able to do it.
Super, thank you very much. And Councillor Upton.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, very pleased to support this report. The do nothing option is not an option for me at all. I know this tip. I've driven up the A1 all my life, and I've watched the conveyor belt drop the spoil onto the tip, and obviously not recently, but in my opinion, it's always been a blot on the landscape, as they would say. So, I mean, I've seen many restorations done, and locally to me, I went around Cotgrave Country Park at the weekend, and what a great example of what can be done with the restoration of these tips. And it's the last one in the county. So, from my perspective, don't have any problems. Let's get on with it. My only regret is it's going to take 14 years. Will I be around to see it and go and see it at the end of the day? But you never know. It's the time frame is a little bit long, but there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Well, yes, I thought that 14 years, it seems a long time, but in a way it is. But there again, life and years seem to go by very quickly, don't they, one way and another. Any other comments or questions on this? I would just concur with your comment there about comparing with the Cotgrave Country Park, because obviously I have an interest in that. It's on my doorstep, and one of the photographs we saw there showed the slopes as it is at the moment. It reminds me of just exactly how the Cotgrave Country Park looked until a few years ago when the restoration had fully taken hold, and you wouldn't. It's completely different now, and it's something very much to look forward to. Councillor Camilleri.
Coming from the north of the county, Mansfield, we're surrounded by these country parks. I think that's right, Councillor Henshaw, and they've been an absolute boon to us. I mean, Crown Farm, Langworth, at Scarcliffe Park. They're absolutely wonderful. And when we were kids looking out there, seeing, I think we could see something about eight tits from one area, couldn't you? And, yeah, and but now it's absolutely, and you don't even know they were there. Yeah, but you don't even know they're there now. They're absolutely wonderful, and I support this 100%. And well done.
Thank you, Councillor Camilleri. And the only other observation I noted or heard, and maybe you might want to come back, you might not, but one of the parish councils said they didn't want to have public access across it. Well, I think that's a bit short-term, is it? Because one day when it turns into a lovely country park and a lovely amenity for people to visit, then I would imagine that that view might change. But that's just an observation. Do you want to come back on those, Mr. Hankin?
Just on the public access, Stirrup and Old Coats, yeah, they don't want public access on it. From the planning policy point of view, the policy of the Minerals Local Plan is to encourage public access onto sites following the restoration. So. My advice to members is the planning policy is supportive of public access on this site.
Okay, thank you. And just going back to the length of time, the 14 years, if there's anything we can do, it can be done to speed that up. I'm sure everyone would welcome that. Right. I don't think there's any other comments or questions. So shall we make a decision? All those in favour, please show. And for confirmation, anyone against? No abstentions. So that's carried unanimously. So thank you very much for that, and good luck with the restoration. Perhaps we'll look forward to a grand opening event when it's all done one day. But as Councillor Upton said, whether any of us will still be around when that happens, who knows? But anyway, that's the. Oh, sorry, Councillor Creamer. Yes.
Just to make a comment, everything in these notes, these last three have been fantastic. But the only thing I have noticed, for some reason, and I thought it was just me originally, but it's not. But for the yellow pages, the planning, I have 50% more blank pages. I've got at least 15 blank pages.
Oh, right.
It's not very environmentally friendly. So I'm sure it's just a glitch, but I've never had so many blank pages.
Well, I'm sure that would be. It's a little bit like, I know we're not supposed to, but it's a little bit like when you print emails off and you nearly always get another page of what maybe one line of text or nothing on at all. And you feel a bit guilty. Mind you, I just tear it up and use it as notepaper. But anyway, digressing. So that's the final item on today's meeting. Thank you for your patience and contributions. Our next meeting is on I think the 22nd of July. So thank you and safe journeys home. Thank you.
Really fantastic news this weekend that government have awarded us finally 28.5 million quid for the A614. Those in the north of the county will know it is the spine of the county from the city all the way up through Bassetlaw into the A1, and there are all sorts of challenges around capacity there, junctions, roundabouts and things that need to be improved for safety, for traffic flows to benefit our economy. That's a huge amount of money, a massive vote of confidence in our delivery and our economic growth, and I'm really pleased to welcome it this weekend.